Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our podcast, The Leader in You. So my co-host Paulina is not feeling well today. She had lost her voice, but I'm sure she will be back next week. But I'm very happy to be here with all of you. This podcast is brought to you by EmC Leaders, and EmC stands for Emotional Connection. I am very excited to have my colleague and my amazing friend, Niamh Hannan, the director of the EmC Certified Center in Ireland, with me today to have this wonderful conversation. Niamh is a chartered psychologist and a certified EmC trainer. Niamh has practiced already EmC for the last 2 years, I would say, and now has trained some coaches and managers and L&D professionals, human resources professionals with the EmC process. So it's very, very exciting to have you, Niamh. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you so much, Lola. I'm really delighted to be here, and hello to all our listeners.
Thank you. You know, Niamh, we've done several podcasts now together. So I want to invite listeners to please check out those podcasts. Before we jump into our topic, which I'm very excited about, is there anything that you would like to share with us, Niamh?
Yeah, I've been this year. It's kind of interesting. I've been working with more senior leadership teams with EmC, and there are a lot of senior leadership teams who are working less than cohesively together, where there's, they're maybe meeting up once a month to come together for a 3-hour session, and they have a big agenda to get through, and it's all work, work, work. And they're not necessarily making the space and the time to gel together and really come together and build those relationships together as a team. So they're feeling often disconnected. They're working in silos recently. I'm losing my words here. So they're working in silos. They're obviously very busy people at a senior leadership level and have lots of responsibilities. But I like to use that saying, I don't know who it was originally, but the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So when you're working in silos, you're just bringing together a group of individuals. That's not a team, that's a group. A team is much more powerful when people are working cohesively together, when they're connected with each other. Then, it's exponential, the power and potential of that team. So I just wanted to kind of bring that in there, get people thinking, because I'm seeing a lot of that happening in recent times.
It's interesting because there is definitely a need for the team to be connected. So obviously that they were part of this training tells us a lot of the longing people have when they work together and how much they need each other in order to thrive in the workplace, in order to really be focused on their job. And it's sometimes it's so hard to continue on and maybe make the effort to see how powerful it can be when we do spend time together and repair those disconnections or those little hiccups that we might have in our relationship. Yeah, so that's really hard.
Yeah, and it's two-sided, because it can be lonely at the top, and if you have a cohesive team, when people are feeling connected, then you don't have to feel lonely. There's always somebody by your side. So as well as that, then if there's maybe a lack of connection because people aren't necessarily prioritizing those relationships, they're prioritizing getting the work done.
Yeah, which actually reminds me of the protective behavior, like getting busy, getting the work done. Because in the moment when we get that work done, we feel valued. We feel like we're gaining that respect, that satisfaction inside. But the relationships are so incredibly important to us. So I'm with you, Niamh. sharing that importance of spending time on relationships actually makes the
Mm.
work faster.
It does. It does. It's helping people to understand the critical importance of that, though, because very often there are so many demands in the workplace, and globally there've been so many changes, and it's so like the ground has been taken out from under people in a lot of ways with the unpredictability and the kind of almost chaos that's happening in our world. Um, and so that the team cohesion becomes even more important because you rely and depend on those people who are closest to you. So yeah, it's just helping people to really understand the critical nature of the relationship and the time that needs to be put into that.
Yes, it's
When you're very
actually
busy, that it can save time. It's like slowing down in order to be able to speed up.
exactly. And it actually brings us to our topic of today's podcast is using the EMC process for self-development. I mean, I love this personally because the EMC process has really helped me to develop, to understand myself. And it's actually a great tool for leaders to get ready for those type of conversation and also understand themselves, what is happening with them in terms of the internal processing. Because sometimes like the work goes so fast, the conversations go fast, we are so focused on just getting things, tasks done, we lose that sense of reflection. We lose that sense of slowing things down and paying attention to those little minor things. And then slowly we start to disengage, and we don't understand why we are disengaging. We don't even understand why we react the way we do. So I feel like using the EMC process has actually opened up a lot more understanding about relationships that I have with people, and it has helped me with obviously with the companies and teams that I've worked with. What I like about it, it is very predictable, it is consistent, and it is repeatable. And that's what helps me to know that using the attachment framework, it will always bring me to the right place. And the right place is connection. That's it. That's the right place for us. It relaxes my nervous system. It opens up my prefrontal cortex so I can be focused and I can really access my creativity and my empathy skills. So, everything that we do in terms of being an effective leader helps us to achieve that when we slow it down and understand ourselves better.
I think so too, Lola. I think it's a wonderful tool. Like I've always used, or for years I've used emotional intelligence assessment tools, and they're so well researched and verified and backed up over years. Um, but then it's like, well, what now? So you have this amazing tool to show you where you're at and show you where your development areas are and where you need to do a bit of work. But then after that, there's like no clear plan as to, well, how do we grow this emotional intelligence? And EMC offers exactly that in a very structured, repeatable way. It's just practice your reconnections, and actually you're smoothing down your edges over time, is how I would like to think of it. So you're less reactive, you're less likely to be triggered and taking offense at things left, right, and center. You're less reactive in your behavior, and you're becoming more aware of your own emotions and of the emotions of others, but also it gives you a language and a very safe structure and process to figure out and identify and articulate your emotions and what's happening in me now. Because I know myself, when I'm fired up in a reactive state, my my emotional brain is in the driving seat at that moment. I can't logic myself out of that state. So having the reconnection form and the whole EMC process means that I can find a safe way to de-escalate and identify what's going on for me, because Otherwise, what tends to happen is we stay stuck in our surface emotions. We stay stuck feeling angry, irritated, frustrated, obsessed, tense. Those are not easy emotions to be around. They push people away. So, people often think that, oh, I should just express my emotions, that's the ideal. But if we're expressing just from our surface emotions, then we're constantly creating more problems, actually, because we're just triggering others left, right, and center. And now we've got even more negative cycles going on around us and disconnection.
Yeah, as and Niamh, as you were talking about being annoyed and irritated, I actually just had a conversation with my colleague about that very thing. My colleague and I would work really well together, and he was helping me with, some of the websites, some of the marketing things. I'm driven in terms of getting things done, and I want to move things forward. And I keep like asking him, like reminding him, oh, don't forget about this and don't forget about that. And a few days ago, he felt so irritated, and he sounded so annoyed. I got kind of startled, and I said, oh, well, I couldn't talk to him at that moment, but that particular tone of voice really kind of like frightened me. Like, why can't I ask a question? What am I going to do now? Can't I just follow up? As a pursuer, I am going into that anxiety. So I waited patiently to the next day, because I knew that he had a lot of other projects that he was working for. And I called him the next day and I said, I felt like I was annoying you yesterday. It got triggered. It made me feel like I was doing something wrong by following up and asking him. And he said, yeah, I was annoyed, and irritated. And I said, well, when you do that, you didn't do anything wrong. But when you do that, it touches my raw spot. It triggers me. It touches my raw spot, as if I'm not being valued for the work that I'm doing. And he's like, that makes sense. And I said, I feel fear in that moment that somehow I did something wrong. And I need reassurance that I didn't do anything wrong. And you get how difficult it is for me when you respond to me with annoyance and irritated voice. And he says, thank you for sharing. Your feelings are valid, and I get that it was difficult for you. I'm here, and you didn't do anything wrong. I want to reassure you, and I do acknowledge that when I use my irritated, annoyed voice, when I get irritated or annoyed, that was difficult for you. And in that moment, Niamh, I felt so heard and understood. And then I said, what triggered you? And he said, what triggered me is when you have to remind me. And in the moment, I felt not important to you because I had all these projects, and suddenly you are reminding me of completing something for another person as if the other person is more important than my work and my load. So he said, you didn't do anything wrong, he told me. You didn't do anything wrong. And at the same time, I did get irritated with the fear that I'm somehow no longer important to you. And what I need to know is that I am important and my work also is important to you. And acknowledge that when you remind me, not that you cannot remind me, you can still remind me, but that was difficult for me. And I gave him the reassurance. It makes sense. Thank you for sharing. And I get that when I remind you, that makes you feel irritated. And when you get a sense that somehow you're not important, and you're very important. And in that moment, Niamh, we're both relaxed. We were both able to move forward and talk about the project. Like, I felt so freeing from not being stuck, but feeling connected again. And we both reassured each other. You can be annoyed, because that's what he wanted, to be reassured that it's okay for him to be annoyed. And I said, I need to know that it's okay for me to remind you. So we both felt like it's okay. We accept, right? We accept each other's I would say like anxieties when we get stressed in the moment, it's okay for us to reach out, and it's okay for the other person also to respond like that. We still accept each other. Without the EMC process, like we would not even have that 5-minute conversation that we were able to have, and boom, come back to each other's balance.
Absolutely. And I love how, as you said there, it didn't take going through the entire reconnection form either. It can be a 5-minute conversation, but you're using the same structure. Like you mentioned there, that you named your triggers and your own reaction and the anxiety, that you felt when you hear his irritated tone, and what you need, and that how it made you feel, and what you need from that. And then he did the same. He was able to say what triggered him, and you were able to hear that then. So yeah, so that literally you can apply this process in a 5-minute conversation to bring safety, calm down the emotions, and reconnect again.
Yeah, and I actually feel, I don't know if you had that type of experience, but you actually can feel a shift inside of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
As soon as you get that reassurance, it's like, remember the still face experiment video where the baby is interacting with the mother and the mother is interacting, and then the mother goes still and silent. And then you see the baby go through these different stages. The first baby tries to reach, then the baby starts screeching and trying to get mother's attention. And then the baby turns away. And then finally, the baby starts crying. And in the moment when the mother comes back and says, "Here I am, it's okay," the baby right away regains her balance and starts smiling, right?
Yeah.
And gets back to that normal response and reaction as before. And that's what I experience personally. And I see it over and over again when I do this process with other members and teams. The same thing happens.
Yeah, it's the shift. It's an emotional
That
shift.
shift.
And that's something that's kind of difficult to measure, and yet we know that it's emotions bring change. That it's through the emotions that we experience that change, that shift. And when we feel differently about somebody, or like you went to bed maybe worrying the night before, at a lack of ease, and leaders everywhere, go to bed thinking, "Oh God, how am I going to have this conversation with this person tomorrow?" Or they avoid the conversation, they avoid the difficult conversation. And that's much more likely is what's happening everywhere, not just for leaders, but for colleagues. Every kind of disconnect that happens between people, those conversations are avoided. It's like, right, we'll pretend that didn't happen. We'll see if they're in a good mood tomorrow. If they're in a good mood tomorrow, great. Definitely not going to put them in a bad mood by bringing it up again. And if they're not in a good mood, well, then I don't want to go near them, and I'm going to avoid them. So it just gets avoided, and the repair isn't done. And when the repair isn't done, the rupture, the fracture is still there. The hurt is still there. The unease is still there. And it's like you're super sensitive then to the next thing that's said, or the next look that's given, or the next behavior that triggers you. And suddenly now you're building up evidence in your book about all the things that annoy you about that person who irritates you, or all the reasons that you think they don't like you or don't have your back. So because that repair work isn't being done. So you've just outlined, a 5-minute conversation that gives you the recipe for that repair work.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, obviously we had to practice, right? We had to practice many times to do the reconnection form. But what I want to cover is that the leaders, when they do have such a situations where they have difficult conversation, or where they are stressed about a particular conversation, is to understand how important it is to slow it down, to understand, recognizing the steps, first of all, in a negative cycle, which are number one, when we get triggered, it hits our raw spot, our sensitivities in that particular relationship. We feel, like you explained, the surface emotion, But because we are not able to slow it down to understand our softer emotions and just process what's going on for us, we jump into the automatic thought, which is kind of like the response to our protection. And then we use the protection, a behavior that basically, it's interesting. It's supposed to try to repair the connection, but it actually does the opposite. It creates more distance.
Mm.
And those behaviors could be disengagement, it could be, like you said, avoiding, it could be withdrawing, or it could go the opposite way, which could be attacking or maybe criticizing or judging. I remember working with this particular team, and the manager says, my direct report keeps coming to our one-on-one, and she keeps complaining about this and complaining about that. And she's like, every time we have a meeting, she is complaining. So complaining is actually one of
Mm.
the behaviors that people don't recognize as a reaching, as a pushing for connection.
Yeah.
But the way they doing it, it creates an alarm or danger to the other person's
Mm.
mammalian brain. So, and she kept saying like, Lola, I don't even want to meet with her. I'm avoiding the meetings with her because I don't know what to do with her complaining. I tried this and this way. Well, she's not understanding that there's a rupture in the connection, and the direct report doesn't know how to talk about her hurt feelings in a way that creates healing and, again, connection. And the manager is not able to recognize.
Yeah.
So when I remember when I did the reconnection process with them and they started to learn, they were so relieved. Niamh, it was just like a big weight of of their shoulders to know that they can share in this safe and professional way of their hurt feelings, and also when they articulated emotions as we have it in our process, the surface, the softer emotions and the image, right, the
Mm.
primary emotions, all of that gave them kind of like relaxation. And you can actually see, right, it's a visually you can view it. I don't know if you experience this in your training sessions as you teach people, but you can actually see how like the ice melts away
Mm.
and the facial expression becomes relaxed as they go through the emotional experience, the box 3 that we have, and talking about the image and talking about their bodily sensation and their fears, and suddenly, whew, you see a different person.
Mm.
Wow, you have a different tone of voice. Wow, suddenly they become more empathic to each other. They
Mm.
can even actually put themselves into the other person's shoes and respond to each other. Have you experienced that?
Yes, and I'm just thinking of even the example that you gave, Lola, that um, uh, like senior leaders say to me so much is that this process, what they kind of keep having to remind themselves of is to slow down, because emotions need us to slow down. The emotions are so fast and we're not used to responding to emotions in the workplace. So that when somebody comes in and complains to us, our first kind of modus operandum really is, you've got a problem, here's a solution, here's a solution, here's another solution, have you tried this, have you tried that, I could do it this way, we can get this person to help. So everybody's working at such a pace that it's all about, fix it, we're all in fix it mode. and actually that's missing the whole point, because this person was coming in because they were feeling disconnected. It's a protective behavior. So when we look beyond the behavior at the emotional layer that's going on, and we slow things down and really hear what's happening and tune into what's happening for them, as you said, when you went through the reconnection form and you heard the emotions, it's like there's this visceral shift and a visible thawing of the ice as people begin to warm up to each other, because they're now relating to each other as human emotional beings and connecting to each other on another level, rather than just these kind of like robots just behaving and fixing and hitting targets. And we're not AI. We're human. We do have emotions. And even I spoke to somebody very senior recently, and I was telling them about this approach, and they were like, "Wow, hold on! All we've always been told is to take the emotion out of it, take the emotion out of it, and respond then. As if I don't know, as if we are machines. That's what's been taught in business schools left, right, and center, I think, or in leadership courses, is take the emotion out of it. Don't respond from an emotional place, which, yes, that's brilliant if you don't feel any emotions, or you can respond from a very calm place, absolutely. But that's not what happens. It means that we're just kind of ignored this elephant in the room, which is the emotions, and we're dancing around that elephant and pretending it's not there. And no, of course everything's fine, Lola, boss, but actually I'm going to go out and give out about this later to my colleague, because I'm not comfortable at all with how you spoke to me earlier, or whatever the issue might be. So that gets skirted around, and it's a very novel approach, really, to address the elephant in the room and the emotions that are there, and give people the skills to do that.
And I think it's also a healthy approach. It just seems to me that we are wired for connection, and when we are able to understand how emotions are actually driving our conversations, how emotions are driving our behavior, it's empowering for us. I just feel like it has empowered me in understanding what I want. It made me confident about my voice and my opinion, and you don't have to agree with my opinion. And I also can be more responsive. Like, for example, I had another colleague where we are working on a project, and I sent him, said, I want your feedback. Here's my changes. What do you think about it? And he emailed me and he says, Lola, I'm really stressed on what's going on with the world right now. And I can't really provide you with this feedback. And I thought to myself, wow, that's very difficult for this person. So instead of just letting it go and waiting, I called him, and I called him and I said, wow, you are important to me. Your experience is important to me. We might not agree on what's going on and things, but I want you to know I'm here. I want to hear what's going on for you. And he said, I feel so sad. And I feel sad, and I'm like, I have deep sadness. And I said, I'm here. I'm here with your sadness. And I want to tell you, thank you for sharing your sadness. It makes me feel so honored and so important to you. It makes me feel like our relationship is important to you, that you are willing to share your sadness. And this is very interesting, because I feel like sometimes people share surface emotions, like I'm very disappointed in how the things are going on, or I'm very irritated, right? But when people feel their sadness, like their deep sadness, that is deeper, more than just on the surface, it really helps us to come closer to that person, more so than if I hear I'm so angry, right? I'm so angry. What's going on? So I really appreciated this person's openness and allowing me. I was afraid that he's not going to pick up the phone when I called. It's always a risk, right? When you reach, you could get rejected. But he did. He picked up the phone, and that gave me an opportunity to be there for this person and to say, I know how difficult it is for you, and I'm here with you. You're not alone in this experience. And I might not agree, we might not agree, it's okay. But you as a human being, I care about you, and you are important to me.
That's so valuable, and it's such a good example of how we need somebody to be there for us in our moments, when we're experiencing those emotions. And as you say so rightly, like when we express from the softer emotions, we it's a more vulnerable emotions. It makes us more human, and it makes us easier for us to connect on that level. And yet, what mostly of the time what we're doing as human beings is just staying at that surface level. And I get that because it can be difficult to even identify our more vulnerable emotions. It can be difficult to go there. It's much easier to stay in the kind of the power of the surface. When we feel angry, there's a power to that. We're irritated and angry and frustrated, and we're having an angry rant in our head. Whereas going into the softer emotions means tuning into our more vulnerable parts, which, let's face it, as human beings, we will do anything to avoid feeling those vulnerable emotions. And yet that's exactly what's there. That's exactly what's going on under the surface. And being able to connect in, as this guy said, just his sadness on a human to human level, you can connect with that.
Yes. And I just want to say this is part of that positive cycle, right? With the negative cycle, when we go into that automatic thought and protective behavior, we actually trigger the other person.
Yeah.
And then they touch the raw spot, they feel surface emotion, they go into automatic thoughts and then protective behavior, which triggers us again. So that is the infinity loop that we want to break. We want to break that is what actually creates more and more conflict and disconnection.
Mm.
With a positive cycle is we tuning in into what's happening. We are able to share it in a open and vulnerable way, as you shared, and then the other person has to accept, right? They have to accept that experience. So I wasn't defending my action or my stance on any particular topic. I wasn't dismissing his emotions, but I was accepting, validating, and reassuring him about his emotions. That continuous reciprocity of sharing, accepting, validating, reassuring, sharing, accepting, validating, reassuring creates a positive opportunity for a stronger bond in the relationship, and that experience of feeling that we can reach and respond, reach and respond. And that is what we want.
And that's what builds a secure relationship. That's where, if you were a leader, for this person, for example, that's demonstrating that you're there for them. The ARE: accessible, responsive, and engaged. And as you say, it's not always reciprocated in that moment. It's reciprocated over time. But it's being there for the other person. It's connecting. Like, you picked up the phone to connect at a time when you could sense that this person was saying that they were struggling, that they were, experiencing difficult emotions. In some ways, our listeners might find that it's easier to be there for somebody when they're feeling sad, for example. And it can be a little bit more testing, or to be there for somebody when they're angry, or when it's being directed at you. So in the workplace, where, for example, with the complaints, if it was criticism and it's being directed at you, that can be more difficult for people to see the need for them to be there for the person. Do you know? It's more likely to trigger us. It's more likely to kind of provoke a reaction out of us and get us into a negative cycle. Because when we feel criticized, then that triggers our own vulnerable feelings. And we often get into protective behavior, the negative cycle side of things, instead of using our skills to go into and to stay in a positive cycle, or bring things into that place.
Absolutely, Niamh. That is so true. And that's why I think when we have ability to practice the EmC Reconnection Form, even with ourselves, and I think the second piece is to share it with somebody, even though you don't have a way to share it with that person that you have a disconnection with, but you can share it with a colleague or a friend or a relative or whoever feels safe for you. It gives you an opportunity to experience how that conversation could go with the person that you have a disconnection with. And it also gives you insights So you can get more balance and you can lean into that safety and experience it. And also, it gives you an opportunity to take yourself into the other person's experience. And this is where I have seen a lot of aha moments happen when people can actually go into the other person's experience and say, like, wow, they also got triggered. Wow, they also have raw spots. Wow, they also have emotions. And this is how they use to protect themselves. It feels like it gives them a more of understanding that we are in this together. This is not you and against me. It's about us being against that negative cycle that we keep creating.
And that's what I love as well, like about this approach, that there's no bad guy, there's no finger pointing or blaming. Because typically when we're in a negative cycle, that's exactly what we're doing. We're blaming the other person. You know, as a pursuer, there's blame, there's criticism, there's judgment that, well, you're the problem. If only you would do it this way, clearly we wouldn't have a problem then, you know. So there's even if it's not explicit, there's often very implicit blame or criticism or judgments there. And that's in the workplace, that's often what's identified, or the person who's identified as a problem, I think, is often the pursuer, because it's like, well, clearly their behavior is not acceptable for the workplace. Therefore, we must, you know, take them to task about the behavior. And nobody ever gets to the root of the issue. And meanwhile, the withdrawers are maybe smugly sitting in the corner going, I'm not the problem because I'm just staying out of it. And yet it takes two. It's about recognizing that there's a negative cycle going on, that the withdrawer behavior is also triggering, and then taking it from recognizing, I love that word, that is protective behavior. So taking the judgment out of that by this is protective behavior because you guys are each hurting and each want to connect and, you know, are longing to feel okay with each other again and feel safe with each other and feel connected with each other again. And it just takes all that blame, and that's part of what creates that safety then, so people can reconnect and go back through the process.
Exactly. It's funny that they actually not protecting themselves, but they're protecting the connection, right? That like pursuers are trying to get that connection back because they feel isolated and alone, and the withdrawer trying to not have more disconnection. So their protection, whatever the connection it has left. It's interesting. It's a protest. It took me a while to understand that type of thinking, that it's actually, wow, that doesn't, you know, even make sense logically, but that's what it's all about. It's protecting the connection.
Yeah. And there's so much fear and anxiety as well when people experience a disconnect, that the emotional brain is like in charge at that moment. And I think for oftentimes when there's like conflict, for example, people recognize they're very stressed, they're losing sleep over this, or if somebody, for example, really feels like their boss doesn't care about them, isn't there for them, or doesn't have their back, then they may well recognize that they're losing sleep over it. I do think a lot of the time people don't even recognize that fear or anxiety that they're feeling. They're just kind of having a response. They're shutting down. They want to get away, or they're going into the protective behavior. So I think it can be really helpful for people to recognize that a lot of this isn't even conscious. It's just almost automatic. Like we have an automatic thought, you know, when we're experiencing those emotions, we automatically go into our protective behavior then out of that. And we don't necessarily even recognize what we're doing or why we're doing it. And so this is all about slowing that down. But you may not recognize that this is happening in you because it happens so fast. Our thoughts, we have so many thoughts flying through our head. Our emotions happen so quickly. We're caught up in that negative cycle before we even are consciously aware, and we're acting out on that. And again, that's why, like, kind of focusing today on that self-development side of things, it's so important to practice slowing down, reflecting. That often it's at the beginning, it's afterwards that you realize, oh yeah, that's what's just happened there. That's why I did this, or that's why I was thinking that way, or that's why I was ranting in my head. And then with many practices and kind of moments of awareness after the effect, when you are making this a conscious effort to become aware of, then in time you start to gain more awareness in the moment, because you get good at slowing down and you get good at noticing, I can feel this wall come up. And then you have the choice of where to go from there. But that's not something that happens overnight. That's something that takes practice.
Definitely. And I like the idea awareness, right? Awareness, we are becoming more aware of the pattern of the dance that we are getting stuck in with the people that we have the relationship with. So that is extremely important. And the components, again, of the EmC reconnection form is definitely the trigger, the raw spots, the emotional experience, the automatic thoughts, protective behaviors, and then the attachment needs that we lose in the moment of the disconnection. And obviously, when those attachment needs are met with with acceptance, validation, and reassurance, we right away regain our balance and we feel these positive emotions. And now we can actually do whatever we need to do. And many times I ask people, what can you do now that you feel more confident and free and relieved? And they say anything. We can do anything. And that is the most, I think, rewarding and satisfying feeling. So this has been such a fun conversation. It's so great to talk to somebody who understands this process and knows all the components that go into the emotional connection, and how important it is for us to create those connections in the workplace. I love it.
I love it too, Lola. And I love, it's such a shift, bringing back to that word, in how you feel, that actually it's like a total resetting of your nervous system. Because as soon as you're triggered, and we go into from the very start of that cycle, it's like a switch in the nervous system, and everything can just calm down again. And that makes it so much easier then to keep that positive connection going. And people are motivated then, because it's like, we know we can do this.
Yes. And people who are listening here with us, you can do it. You can understand your relationships. You can understand your pattern, and you can shift from a being negative pattern into a positive pattern. So thank you, Niamh, so much for joining me on this conversation. I can't believe how fast the time went by, but this was so fun to have you here.
Thank you, Lola. It's been an absolute pleasure. And looking forward to next time.
Well, I look forward to seeing you at the ATD conference. If anybody who is attending the ATD conference, please come join us. Niamh will be there with me at all 3 sessions that we have. We have authors chat. We have the solutions session that we will be doing the experiential, taking you actually through the EmC Reconnection Form. And then we have the learning stage, where we're going to talk about the 5 myths in conflict resolution. So I'm so looking forward to seeing you there, Niamh.
I can't wait to get there and to meet you in person, Lola. So hopefully, if any listeners are going to be at the ATD conference, do come up to our stand and meet us and say hi.
Exactly. Yeah, we're going to be in booth 2205. Thank you again very much for everyone who joined us today. It was such a great conversation. And please know that we are here for you, and we love sharing this process, the EmC process that has given us freedom, connection, and thriving in our workplace. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.